Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of Life podcast. Today is going to be a fantastic episode. I'm very excited to share it with you. You've all heard me talk many times about my childhood friend, John Sketchley. He is here with me today at Satellite Studios, and we are going to talk about some very interesting things that I hope you all enjoy as much as I am going to enjoy talking about it. So stay tuned, enjoy the episode, and if you want to know anything more about Roots of Life, go ahead, go check out rootsoflifepodcast.com. You can find us on patreon.com/Roots of Life, or you can also check out our Instagram handle where James posts some beautiful pictures, beautiful landscapes, and inspirational quotes. So if you have any questions or topic ideas, feel free to hit us up at rootsoflifepodcast@gmail.com. So again, I hope you all enjoy the episode. It's going to be a great one. I guarantee it. I'm very excited for it. So stay tuned. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Roots of Life podcast. My name is Taylor. I am one half of the hosts on the Roots of Life podcast, not joined by He Only Does Everything, James Fitzgerald, but I am joined today by a very special person in my life, very special person to the universe, my best friend, John Sketchley, who you've heard me talk about many times, and he is here now today with me at Satellite Studios. John, thank you for being here today.
Hello. I have already done this introduction once, but sometimes technology complicates things, only sometimes. So I didn't want to completely replicate my first response, but hello, I am here finally to continue this live local journal with my best friend Taylor, and I am happy to be here and finally open up with my friend that I have not seen in a long time.
Yeah, so I have a question for you, John, and I want to ask you, like, if I was like a regular elevator pitch, you know, it's the idea of, you know, when someone asks you, like, what do you do? And, you know, a lot of people identify with their jobs. You know, if I ask someone, what do you do? A lot of the times that means, how do you make money? But I want to ask you, like, if you, to all the people out there, how do you identify yourself? You know, if I asked you, like, who are you? What do you do? How would you describe yourself? Like, tell everybody out there who John Sketchley is.
It's like such a broad and like all-encompassing introductory question. Okay, so I guess at the present moment I would describe myself as a bit of a nomad. I've been learning from a few different individuals, like how to live life in a different way. And I guess now I would say I'm a traveler, I'm a tree planter, and like I'm a lot of other things, but like these things change like throughout the years. Like I find that every year or so, or 1 year or 2 years, like I'm onto a different trip. We have these experiences like early in life, and I can never kind of stick on to one thing. I always have to be like trying to jump into and like hop into like a new kind of a trip, like a new experience. So like presently, like I'm not writing as much as I used to. I'm not painting as much as I used to. I'm not watching TV as much as I used to. But so if I were to describe myself, like I'm into a lot of personal discovery. Like I've been doing a lot of like just breaking open the head, like working with the meditation and like a number of different vectors, like of exploring the inner self. So,
Well, that's what life is all about, right? It's about, you know, the journey and trying different things and finding out how you can grow and evolve as a person. So, okay, well, you just came from vipassana.
Mm-hmm.
You just did a 10-day silent meditation. And that's not the first time you've done it, but the second time.
yes.
So, let me ask, like, how did the first time differ from the second time you did it? Yeah. And how like, what made you want to go back? Because I know a lot of people, like, maybe you would only do it once.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, every person heading into this experience will have a very unique experience because humans are like highly specialized and highly individualized and like very variable. So like what I say like won't apply for the next human. So like anything I say, like I'm not trying to blanket any genre or like any personality type, but like so for me heading into Vipassana the first time it was right after tree planting because my incredibly inspiring friend Ben Burge had been speaking about it like ever since I had met him at a protest camp in Vancouver, and through a tree planting, I had really learned to meditate. Like before I even knew what vipassana was. Like I was almost meditating every tree I would plant. It's actually the perfect metaphor for meditation. And like when you learn meditation and then you would tree plant, like you're planting like seeds of the future, and really that's what we do with every thought. Like we're planting seeds of the future. But so for the first time with the vipassana, like getting into it, I had all of these expectations, and like that's usually unavoidable with like anything in life, like unless you're some amazing like incredible yogi in the mountains in the cave, or like some person who has like really like discovered themselves to the point where they're completely in the present moment. You will always have expectations, and that's okay. Like that's the part of the human experience and the paradigm. We just have to like understand how to be aware of the expectations and to not be very negatively critical about like the expectations that we have, because it's organic in terms of organic in the sense of how we are programmed in the modern world. So that's kind of like a long like I'm putting off actually talking about the meditation, but I'm just like running into it. It's like the prelude about it. So it was one of the most intense experiences of my life, like the most hard.
I've heard it can be really hard. Like you go kind of stir crazy for a while, and so you kind of, you go. And then I've heard, I've never experienced it myself because I've never done it, but I have vocalized to the fans that I will be going, to the listeners that I will be going to Vipassana in May. And so they are all aware of that if they have heard previous episodes. But I've definitely set that expectation as well.
It's almost impossible not to.
Yeah, I've like, because you've told me stories about it. And I also have one of the yoga teachers at the studio that I practice at is also there right now. And so I've had conversations with her about what she was kind of expecting through the stories that her colleagues and friends have told her about. And then also the expectations. I have this expectation that my life's going to change. Like I have this expectation that all these problems in my life are going to be solved.
Well, the first thing that you said is true, like that your life is going to change, but like that's true anyways, even without vipassana. And actually that's one of the things that vipassana teaches anyways, is that everything will change.
But do you think you're inducing change? Like you're forcing it almost. I mean, which isn't a bad thing, but
change happens all the time anyways. You're just invoking another kind of change, and it's like accepting change as like the law of nature, like just as something that organically happens just as much as the rain will always come. And it's just something that's like there, but it's about like understanding what kind of change you want to see in your life, and then like kind of speaking through that to modality, like in terms of really being disciplined, like when you are in the meditation class and getting out of it what you want. Because like even if people do a meditation class or like an ayahuasca retreat or like any of these things that are now like in modernity like advertised to be very transformational, it's not necessarily so that if you do these things, if you take these pathways, that like you will see what you want to see, like these people advertising on YouTube testimonials. Like you need to really drop everything and really commit yourself to these pathways to actually see the actual progress and benefit.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm really excited for Vipassana myself, is because whereas it's actually like you're putting in the work to change, whereas I feel a lot of the times in, the modern age and this day where, somebody has a shoulder pain or somebody has maybe some depressing thoughts, they go to a doctor and they just expect this doctor to solve their problems because this doctor has been studying for 4 or 5 years, and now it's, here's a pill, this is going to solve your problem. And then really it's like you're not addressing the problem, you're just kind of putting a blanket over it, in a sense where you're not addressing the pain, you're trying to numb it. And so that's why I'm really excited, is because I've met this resistance. I'm aware of this resistance in my life that's preventing me from doing certain things. And I'm really excited because I feel like I'm putting this 10 days aside to really just like focus and really try and work at meeting this resistance with, I'm trying to break it open. And I love the quote, breaking open the head, is I'm really trying to dig deep and kind of break open that block and just get in there and kind of see if I can actually induce the change myself, as opposed to relying on someone else to solve my problems for me.
Yeah. Like a lot of people heading into Vipassana, like within the first like 3, well, for me it was earlier, but like within the first 3, 4, 5 days, like their head's so broken open that they just want to run away. They just want to escape, because it's very intense to deal with only yourself and your thought patterns for that amount of time all day. Like for those people who are not familiar with Vipassana, like they ring the bell, they ring the like wake up alarm at 4 a.m.
That's so early.
So you don't have to wake up this early. Like there's no one there like at your door like watching you in terms of like your time. It's time to get up now.
There's no drill sergeant.
No, but your own conscience,
You're
like
right.
your own conscience.
How bad do you want it?
Yeah, like well, you are there for a particular reason, so like it's up to you if you want to really work hard or like just like take a vacation for 10 days, and you certainly can do both. Like if you want, you can pay $0 and get all of the facilities for free. So if you just want to freeload, you can do that too. But like what an opportunity to like really fix your computer, really do like a defrag on like all of the shit that's been clogging you up for this long. And for like a lot of people, like that's what they set aside, and that's what they're determined to do. So 4 a.m. they set the alarm. Most people, with my experience, don't really arrive till like 5 o'clock. But like you can have a shower and like get ready and then like walk into the meditation hall. I think the breakfast is not served until like maybe like 6 o'clock. But with my experience, if I didn't hop right out of bed at the first alarm, that I would just go right back to sleep, and I wouldn't do anything until breakfast. So like they ring the bell again 20 minutes later, like okay, like now you should be in meditation hall, but a lot of people aren't. But what you're supposed to do is meditate in your own room or in like the residential quarters, but especially in the morning. I think in general, even when you're out of the Vipassana center, the morning time is always the best time, because that is like the start, the intro of your whole day, and that will kind of be like the setting, like the wavelength that you'll be operating on for the rest of your day. So like it's the best time to meditate, and if you can meditate throughout the day, like so be it. I mean, everyone's ordinary day is so complicated and so congested with other things, but if you do in the morning like a little bit, then like you're on the right path. But so yeah, I mean, I could get into explaining more about the actual technique, but
I want to actually kind of dive a little deeper into that because you touched on a couple things there that I'm actually really intrigued by. One, just talking about the breakfast, and I know that they serve a vegetarian diet, unless you request, I think, poultry of some sort, right?
well, at the center I was at, which is the one that's not quite at Merit, anyways, but they serve all vegan food. They have like a bit of cheese and a bit of milk on the side if you want.
Oh, okay. So the idea of meditating in the morning, to, like you said, to really set the tone for your day, that's something that I've noticed that I've implemented that practice in a certain form. I've talked to you about it, and I think I may have mentioned it on the podcast previously, but just writing in my journal every day. And so it's like, that's my form of meditation in the morning, because I'm just getting my thoughts out, and that's like the first thing I do. And I always find by the time I'm done that, I'm wide awake, like I'm just so alert because I've already activated my brain in a certain way actively while getting these thoughts out.
Yeah, you are breaking your fast with this self inquiry, but like a lot of times, like when you're writing in the journal, it's not about reading it later, it's just about getting it out on paper.
That's
like
exactly it.
Flowing.
I never go back and read it. Another thing that I wanted to kind of get back to as well is, you mentioned that when the bell rings, you kind of had to hop out of bed right away, or else you wouldn't get up, and you're kind of,
Me personally,
stuck there. And so there's a motivational speaker. I think she may be a doctor of some sort. Her name's Mel Robbins, and I had listened to her talk, and she had kind of coined this idea or phrase, I guess. She calls it the 5-second rule, and so it's this idea that as humans, we have these neurological ideas and pathways, and our brain will get in the way of that a lot of the time. And so she calls it the 5-second rule, where if she has an idea and she wants to do something, and you can't, and sometimes, like a lot of the times, you'll think about it too much, and it's like if you're at the cliff, or like if you're wanting to jump into a river or a lake, and you sit there and you think about it too much, then you're more off put to do it, right? But she has this rule, and she calls it the 5-second rule, where you count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you do it, right? So what happens is you're interrupting your brain by counting to prevent yourself from thinking about doing it. And she does exactly that, where she says she wakes up in the morning and she tries to set the tone of her day by counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then she shoots up out of bed. And because she gets out of bed so quick, she's setting her tone for the day by being energetic and like moving forward.
Yeah.
And she's not allowing her brain to interrupt her by being like, no, I don't want to get up yet, I don't want to do this. And so I found it really interesting that you have discovered that on your own, whereas a lot of people nowadays in modern times, like, I didn't know about that. I didn't think about it until I saw her talk about it and I heard her talk about it. So I think that's a perfect example of what Vipassana can do for you, is you did that exploration and you kind of discovered it on your own. And so that's really cool. And I think that's a perfect example of how you can teach yourself. You can learn so much about yourself just by literally taking the time, as short as 10 days, which actually kind of sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Think about what you do in a week.
Yeah.
It comes and goes so fast. Like I can hardly remember what I did last week. It just comes, right? And then before you know it, it's over. And so I think to take 10 days out of your schedule to do this and learn about yourself is like, it can just be so beneficial in so many ways.
I think what she was doing is a really good like prelude to total spontaneity, like just about being like completely spontaneous. And in terms of counting down from 5, like that's like a good way to keep yourself distracted from like everything else that would be entering your brain in those 5 seconds. It's a good like lead up in terms of being completely intuitive. Like a lot of people have this intuitiveness naturally, and like it's just something that's in their life path, like whether it's genetics or whether like it's something that they gathered while they were raised as a child. But like it seems like it would be something that that would help people that aren't really too confident about making decisions in the moment. And like really that's kind of what vipassana helps you with, is about kind of learning how to deal with how to just be in the present moment, because there's so many people in our modern age, like and really in any age, we're obsessed with the past, and we're obsessed with the future in terms of like these bordering like places to live in. And to live in, I mean like in our heads, because that's where we do all of our living every day. We're constantly reminiscing about the past, and we're constantly trying to predict the future. And sometimes these things are helpful, and I mean helpful in the sense of making money, or in terms of like remembering old loved ones and getting over them. But vipassana really tries, if you are suffering, if you're miserable, because you're spending too much time in either one of these spaces, it helps you come out of them for a second. If you're a good meditator, you can meditate longer, but it takes a long time to really meditate properly because your brain goes so crazy over this and that and this and that and this and that and this and that. So it takes, for me personally, it took a long, long time for me to really be present, because of the constant crazy advertisements that we basically have to deal with, just even walking, or like if you were raised on watching a TV, like that kind of shit is already in your head. Like it just breaks your stream of consciousness right away. So to really meditate and to be present is like such a difficult thing for our modern men and women to like really do and practice.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many distractions in this day, and everything moves so fast. You know, living here in the city, there's a constant stream of movement where everybody is moving from one place to another, and it's really hard to navigate it peacefully. You know, you have to, I think, do exactly that. You know, do it very consciously and practice it to really stay at peace with it, because, you know, like you said, we're exposed to so much so often, especially with advertisements. I always think about the recent episode, or I don't think it's very recent, but the South Park episode.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that one with Butters, or with Jimmy, and he's like the news editor, and they like how to tell like an ad from an ad, and it was like the little girl, and she was an ad. me and Jimmy actually ended up watching this episode of South Park while we had done multiple hits of LSD. And so it was so crazy, and it really opened it up to really. And now I constantly look for like just when somebody's trying to sell me something, or when something seems kind of like it's put in a place unnaturally, you know, or I'm trying to like where it's just like it's got this weird spin on it, you know, and you can usually pick up on it. But I think they're just getting so clever with it, with especially how often we're exposed to those kind of things, like in social media and the online presence.
South Park, they have to be that clever and brilliant to cut through the bullshit, and they do that brilliantly. Like for anyone who like can't handle their like silly drawings and stuff, like you're not looking at the big picture. Like they have really done like a lot of intense discovery, and now like they're trying to hand us the keys back to like our own thought patterns, because everyone is consumed with like the news and the media, but like they're kind of like slipping us like the notes under the table, under our desks. Like, this is what reality really looks like. You have to really be listening.
Matt Stone and Trey Parker.
Yeah.
Those are the guys. Those are the homies that you're slipping notes to in class. You know, they're passing them to you under the table.
And they're like, the world's fucked up.
The government's the teacher, you know? Like, there's like the just like the overall, like, seeing people who are trying to like control it all, and they're like trying to make sure that you know about this stuff and know the answers. And it's funny because people don't look at that show that way.
Yeah. Even just the modality that they've chosen to teach, because really that's what they are. They're teachers.
Absolutely.
And when you think of your old high school teachers, using the same word doesn't really apply. But like how a lot of people really learn is through comedy, because when you're laughing at something, that's a really important thing to you. That's a really organic experience. When you're crying about something, that's also a kind of an orgasmic thing that's happening that you can't stop. So when you're laughing about something, it's like a very deep imprint on yourself. So when you can teach and when you can learn through laughing, like that's something that you will remember. When you're trying to learn and remember things through repetition, yes, that does also help for certain individuals, but it's not something that will like maybe stay with you for your whole life. Like if you're laughing about something, if you think something is very hilarious, and if you're learning it through South Park, these types of lessons will really stay with you.
I've learned from comedy so much, especially in the past, I would say 6 months. It was right around the time I got into podcasting, and I got really even in just to listening to podcasts before we had even started one. And I started listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and I had like watched some of his new specials, and through that I was exposed to other comedians. And that was when I really developed an appreciation for stand-up and what comedy does and how they teach, because there's something that sticks with you about comedy. Like you said, when you're laughing, like you'll remember that. It always I always think of another saying that kind of relates to this is the idea of make a girl laugh and you know, she'll remember you, right? You know, and it's that idea of like funny guys can get girls. You know, it's just the idea that like if you can make someone laugh, like they're gonna remember you, because they remember you as not just a person, but somebody who, you know, like you're wise, or like, you know, you're comical, you're interesting to talk to, or whatever. So there's something there to be drawn from, and there's some kind of energy about you that people will remember, right?
Because not everyone can let go, and really that's what you're doing when you're laughing, is you're letting go, because you are not actively thinking, okay, I'm making one laugh a cycle now, ha 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 ha. That's not an articulated thing. That's something that's happening completely organically. Just like an orgasm, just like when you're crying, you're not thinking about something like each cry cycle, like each like however you cried. Like when you're letting go at that extent, at this organic natural state, that like laughing and crying like humans are supposed to experience this, like when a person can make you do that, you're very vulnerable. But when you're very vulnerable, you are also very open, and when you're open, you can learn something.
That's when you can grow. Yeah, that's it's and that's, I think, a lot of the times, even now, looking back, you know, I had even just expressed this to you earlier today. It was like, around you growing up, I felt like I could be vulnerable around you, because obviously like we just had a very close relationship, and you know, we grew up together and we kind of understood each other, and in a way that even I couldn't be vulnerable like that around you know, certain family members, you know, people who are supposed to be, you know, when you think of family, you think of your blood, you think of the people that you grow up with, that you're closest to. And you know, that's why, you are my family. I have friends who are my family, and that's because I can be vulnerable around you, and I feel like I can learn from you. And going back to the school metaphor and the South Park creators, being your friends who are slipping you notes in a class, I feel like and it's hard to put that into a direct context or a numerical value, but I feel like I've learned more from you in my lifetime than I ever did from my high school teachers because of just like the knowledge that we've shared with each other over the years and the time we've spent together, and even just exploring each other as well as ourselves together, right? Like we've done so much together in our 20 years of friendship, you know? So it's, when you think of it like that,
when you say it like that, it sounds intense. Like,
yeah.
When you say 20 years in general, I mean, at least for us, like, we're not that old, but like, when you look at a teacher, like, their job is to kind of make you efficient in like a certain like program. So like, when we hang out and stuff, like, we're kind of being as like open as possible. So like, we can kind of like understand ourselves like outside of the program that everyone is plugged into. But like it's also not the teacher's fault. Like they're just trying to make money, and really like some teachers, like I went back to John Barsby and I went to go talk to some of my old teachers. Well, actually mainly one, my old English teacher. And,
which teacher was this?
Miss Hadu. And like she was always like the wackiest, weirdest kind of teacher. I
remember her.
And that's why I liked her, because she was so weird, and we talked about so many things.
Did you have a certain kind of relationship with her? Like, did you, besides the fact that she was a little quirky, did you feel like you connected with her more than your other teachers?
Yes, like she's always been the individual that I went back and made contact with the few times that I did go back to my old high school. I just really resonated with her because like she could kind of tell me things that were off the program, like off the mic, offline, like the things that like weren't on the itinerary that she could kind of speak to me too. And like I was also asking her questions like can you be this honest that you are with me, with your new students? I'm like, in this age of Trump, like, can you tell your students these things? Like, is the high school like prohibiting you from like speaking like this to me? And it's just an interesting place that she's in to like just the teachers of our new age are like I find them very inspiring to be warriors of culture, because really each culture is warring with each other constantly in terms of this is how you should be, that's how you should be. And it's hard to like really be like someone who fights those battles.
Well, I think it's a really interesting time in our culture because we are going through a phase where times have changed so much in the past 40 years, right? And you do have the teachers who, our teachers are responsible for teaching the youth of the future. And times are changing so rapidly right now. So you have teachers who, as you said, are concerned with making money. You have teachers who come from a very different generation where they are very, I guess just old school, to put it in the most like general context, without getting too specific. But, they just have very old fashioned ideas. And so now we're coming into a phase where everything is changing, like in terms with the political stances and our economics, and just the countries that surround us are just changing so rapidly. And now the teachers coming that are starting to teach now, like I have a couple friends who are now teachers, and that seems like such a weird thing to me because I feel like I'm still a child, and for like someone my age to be, it goes to the idea of like a teenager having a baby. It's like you're responsible for these lives, but you also, within this system that our government has created, you only have a year to try and influence this child so much.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, children can be the best teachers because they have less conditioning in terms of like what you'll hear your young ones speak of. Like, it may seem like weird and like unusual to be like, yeah, you don't understand the real world. But when you hear these children say like this or that like prophetic thing, like they're really saying that from like their inner self, unhampered, like unrestricted from like, oh, I should behave a certain way because I live in this city and people here in Canada, blah, 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 like we believe in a certain thing. So like, I've been kind of reading into this like sometimes, and that's what certain types of meditation, vipassana, kind of teach you to be with. Like they help decondition yourself. So in deconditioning, it brings you back to that state of like before you were conditioned, and in that state, that's where you were in your childhood, like before your mom told you things that you believed in. So like, I'm sure your mom always told you things ever since you were a baby, but like,
You can do anything you want. You shouldn't do that.
exactly. Like,
You know, it's weird because yeah, that is the idea that your parents tell you that you can do anything you want to do because they want you to succeed naturally, right? But then also they tell you that you can't go down the road to play with your friends because there's no parent monitoring the situation. So you can't actually do anything you want. You can only do what your parents want you to do.
yes.
Which is weird. And so the deconditioning idea, which is really interesting because I've practiced that a little bit where I was reading a book. It forced me to practice exactly that. It came up with the idea that it's a creative self-help book. And so the idea was that, you know, we're taught these things as children and we carry those things into our lives as we become adults. But not all those things are necessarily positive influences in how we live our lives now. So you have to kind of start doing that self-exploration to kind of like decondition those things, which is you know, sometimes it can be to do with ego. A lot of the times it can be to do with what things your parents said. I'm actually really interested. I want to tell you this because you were a huge influence in my life as a child because you were my best friend for so many years.
Yes.
And so you played guitar, you played instruments, and so I naturally wanted to do that. I wanted to do the things my friends wanted to do. I wanted to be culturally accepted. I wanted to be cool to my friends in my inner circle. So naturally, that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to play the drums. So I asked my dad, Dad, can I get a drum set? And he said, you have to ask your mother. So I asked my mother, Mom, can I get a drum set? She said, no.
The keepers of secrets,
And
the
so
mothers.
I went back to my dad and because my mom said, no, it's too loud. And so we lived in a pretty small place, as you know.
Yeah.
Other people might not know. So I went back to my dad and I said, Dad, Mom said no for this reason. Can you help me build a soundproof shed outside so that I can have a loud instrument without bugging anybody? My dad said yes, but you have to go ask your mother. And so I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, can I build soundproof shed outside so I can have a drum set? And she said no. And that was something that I carried with me for many, many years. I started exploring these ideas of now I wouldn't say I'm a musician, but I am a professional within the music business.
You are a
have
musician. Stop being so modest.
Okay, well, I play instruments, I make music,
Understand.
I produce, I do things, yes, within the
Yes,
business.
yes.
But I've always had this resistance that I've met with. You know, I have this like idea where it's like I should be working on something right now. I should be making music, but I don't feel like it. And there's always this guilty feeling that I get that comes along with that. And so I started, and I came to the idea that there was reasons for that. There was a reason that I felt this guilty feeling for not doing something that I wanted. And I started exploring backwards. And I realized my mom was a part of that. Now I have like, I don't hold anything against her, you know, like she's my mom. I love her to death.
Yeah.
She's like the greatest person ever. But that was something that I had explored, was she was a quote unquote monster from this resistance that I face on a daily basis because of something that she conditioned into me. And now you yourself were a monster in your own right, and you were a champion in my life because you always were there for me and you always encouraged me to do things and try things and do better. But at the same time, you also were the person that like I strive to be like. I tried to do the things that you did, and you were always, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily to say that you were always better than me, but like it was always like you did music, so I wanted to do music. And then over time, it like I found my own way to do things, but at the same time, like if I wanted to do something, you would tell me like you can do that, you can try this, and you can if you know, and so you taught me that as well. And so you not that you were probably conscious of it. I mean, you're just a great person, and you're, you know, super, you like to share wealth, and you like to share knowledge, and you vibrate on the high frequency. And so I love you for that. But as children, I'm sure you weren't aware of it, but like there was like, I respected you. I held you up to a pedestal in probably an unhealthy way. But so, and that's like now, because of this like way that I have this childhood, I now am met with this resistance, and now so now I'm really excited to go and decondition that and try and work on that, because that's something that I've been working with for a long time, is trying to decondition those ideas that I've developed from a child. And now, you know, moving forward, as I'm like really excited to deal with it.
Well, moving forward, like you have expounded on, like a lot of times we have to move backwards in order to move forward. And yes, like it's important to stay in the present moment, but we're in modernity, and like a lot of times we have to analyze the past in a certain way that is healthy, like see everything that has been continually repeated like in our lives, like we're not learning from the lessons of our past. The same things happening over and over and over again. In each generation, we're dealing with the same problems. And it's just something that keeps coming up, and it will keep coming up until we really, as a collective society, learn how to like deal with. And also these negative things that happen in life, like I had recognized when you had said something like a long time ago in your talk before I talked last, like I was remembering certain things that you were saying and like trying to like trying to bring them up again because they were important. But I also didn't want myself continually like trying to think of these things to like to obstruct like the flow. But I do want to say that these negative aspects of life, they really teach each individual to like learn how to deal with ourselves, because we can't ignore the shadow aspects of ourselves. Like it is a scientific fact that we exist, that we have a shadow. So don't pretend that the shadow does not exist. And the shadow means everything that is dark in your life, everything that is negative, and that means like anything you encounter in your day that like you're unhappy with, everything that you encounter in your day that like disrupts you. And these aspects about yourself, Carl Jung used to speak about, you really have to learn how to integrate your shadow, because it's a part of you naturally, because you exist, you have a shadow.
I absolutely love that metaphor. Like, I love the way you described that, because I've never even considered the shadow that way. But that is something that in recent months I've really realized, is that to address a lot of the issues now, you have to go back and you have to kind of look at the past experiences that you've had, because like I said, like I kind of touched on before, is a lot of people will try and find ways to deal with the pain like currently, or they'll try to numb it with, necessarily like narcotics or drugs or anything of that nature.
Or even certain ideas can numb things. If you get attached to certain ideas and you get trapped in like that idea and what that idea feeds you, like maybe that idea makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Like I just mean in the sense that people think that narcotics or this or that is like the only way that like you can get numbed, but certain people that don't take this and that drug can certainly be numb and certainly be high off of a certain idea or a religion that can really be something that like that can be addicting, that can control people's lives even more than any drug could like hope to control.
Ooh, you just gave me a great segue, and this is what I'm excited about, because this gets into some of the spiritual and religious conversation, one that I'm excited to touch on. So there's the idea that you can get the high from these ideas, and it's interesting because I was introduced to spirituality through religion. That was my introduction, and I was introduced to it through this profound moment that I had. I had this introduction, and I had this moment where I was like, I recognize this as something, and I got a high from it, and I was in love with it the moment I hit it. Like it was just it. I had this moment where I felt like the universe was speaking to me, and there was no explanation from it. And I remember walking out of this building at this moment, and it was like I relate it to being on MDMA, and where it was like I walked outside and the sun was shining and everything was super bright and it like very euphoric. And that was how I remember it. And I just thought that I remember having that moment, and I was like, if this is what happens, like if this is what this at the time, like this God can give me, like this is what I want. And it was the same as any drug high. It was the idea of that this person, this thing can give me what I want, because I almost like was addicted to it at that moment. And then it was through later exploration and it was only shortly after that I learned about that I started practicing yoga. And so I started exploring myself more shortly after that, which was just a whole other experience. And it kind of gave me similar moments where I started to explore more inward, and I stopped relying on an outer source and realized that I am that source. I have the power within myself to bring on these moments through self-exploration and through acknowledgement and empowerment.
The inner source is the only source, otherwise you're just faking it.
Just to be transparent with everybody, we just took a quick little break. We had to go to the bathroom.
A human break, because humans pee, right?
Yes, that is a natural human bodily function.
And like, why hold that back? Because like, if you hold shit back, what's happening when you hold shit back? Like, what's happening to you?
No, you can't fight life. You can't meet resistance with resistance. You got to understand it. You got to accept it and just kind of go with it. But John, I'm going to ask you a question. Now, this is the only traditional Roots of Life question that I'm going to ask you tonight.
Yes.
And I might inform you a little bit on it after I pose the question, just to give you a little bit of insight to the kind of answer that we look for. But John, I want to know, what tickles your fancy?
What tickles my fancy? La libertad. Well, like, actually, that's impossible, is to know the truth. But what tickles my fancy?
Do you want a little bit of context, or do you feel comfortable with answering the question as is?
I feel comfortable answering the question as is because it's such a broad question and you posed it to me on such a live and local and interactive form. So, I would assume that the question means right now, like in terms of what tickles my fancy right now. I'm going to say letting go because letting go allows me to really be in like a state that I can express myself or organically. And if you want something more specific, maybe I say maybe I say hiking a trail out in the mountains of like North Vancouver. And in terms of letting go, like I'm out, maybe if I've hiked for a few hours, I'm away from like a lot of tourists and pedestrians. So I'm in a very calm state where I can not be thinking about what they think of me or like the people passing by. Like I can only be thinking about what's inside, but then at a state, you're only observing what is outside. And in this unadulterated state of non-human contact, you can just look at nature and not think. Now, think about that for a second before you don't think, which is an intense proposition. I know.
You're challenging the listeners, John.
Wow. Like, a lot of people like Henry David Thoreau, like his meditation was not Eastern. It was not some Indian thing that he like absorbed. Like, yes, he read about the East, but he did not adopt this himself. His meditation was observing nature and just simply observing it. And like he could get his meditation high. We spoke of this earlier. By just observing two different kinds of species of ants warring, destroying each other. He watched this. I'm like imagining him, like his head zoomed into these ants, just like killing each other, but like them being such a small thing. Unlike he's a human, he's large, like he doesn't know what's happening until he moves his head a few inches, above these ants.
I imagine the idea of a child with an ant farm watching the ants roam around with, like, he's watching them with a magnifying glass, which is the same kind of metaphor that people apply to God with us, right? Is there's some overpower, overlord kind of monitoring us, who is kind of, being the puppet master, as just watching us and kind of controlling every situation, thinking that he knows the power, but no, you hit that so perfect on the head with a tickled fancy, because that's a question we like to ask on the Roots of Life podcast, because people, we try and enlighten people and just spread knowledge and spread wealth a little bit. And so instead of talking about negative things and putting things in, associating with negative connotations, we like to just talk about things that we like, and because it just put them in a positive light, right? And so we ask that question. And hiking, like, that's such a great one. And Jimmy likes to hike quite a bit, and so he does short and simple hikes. He'll go hiking for a few hours. He's not the type of person to hike overnight and do I think strenuous 6-hour, 12-hour hikes, but he'll do. My understanding of Jimmy's hiking practice is he does short, maybe 1 or 2 hour hikes kind of thing.
And that's a good place to start.
No, it is. And I don't even think you have to start there. Like, I think you don't even have to expand on that, right? Yeah. But taking that time out of your day to minimize
Immerse
the noise.
immerse yourself in something else.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Is a good start.
we've touched on that multiple times. Like I think one of Jimmy's tickled fancies one time was
That's such a weird term.
it's a,
Weird
I
term.
know, and that was why we coined it that way. It was
Yeah,
because
it's good.
it just
it makes
it's not
people
like
feel
what's
weird.
something that you like. You know, it was
Too broad.
what's something. Yeah, it was. It's just something that we were able to put it in that form, which kind of it's recognizable, which as to what it actually means, but it's interesting enough that it kind of catches your ear every time. But I think one time Jimmy's was the sunshine on a mountainside, which comes directly, and another one of mine was like a fresh
I like
powder
that.
day on the side of a mountain.
I like
like a
those
sunny
both.
powder day.
I definitely like those both. I can visualize them now. As you spoke of each one, they each created an image in my head. And really that's how we deal with every problem in our life, is like an image in our head. Even relationships that we have, we are not really dealing with people like your love relationship. We're dealing with an image in our head. And that's
Of what the relationship should be or what it should look like? Is that what you're kind of referring to?
Well, I mean, each person is different. So basically what I'm saying is some Krishnamurti shit. An image in our head is just something that's unavoidable. That we confront the image before we confront the real thing, is what I'm saying.
Oh, so we should not judge a book by its cover. Are you saying that it's a natural human tendency to do so?
It's something that we should be aware of, that we're not confronting the real book. We're confronting our image of the book before we even have a look at the book, which will inflict our reading of the book if we always have this idea of like what it should be, of like what the image is before we even have had a look at the book.
No, and I think that's kind of exactly what the phrase explains is, if I put an expectation on what I'm expecting from vipassana, I might get a completely different thing. Like if my expectation might actually influence what I think of the experience, which might not necessarily be a good thing. I should actually go into it with an open mind, not judging the book by its cover or what other people like yourself or my other colleagues and peers have experienced from that practice.
It's unavoidable. It's a human reflex. But as long as we do these things, we're aware of them. Because so many things we do in life are unconscious. Which is also okay. It's the human experience. But if we're aware of these things that we do unconsciously, even if we're doing them, even if they are negatively affecting our lives, if we are aware of them, at least we can put them in a place, sitting in the mix, in a position that we are understanding how they affect the rest of the mix, how they are affecting the whole composition in its entirety. We can learn how to, in certain songs and certain tracks of our life, how we can learn how they really fit into the composition, and how maybe in certain songs of our lives, how they can sit higher up in the mix and how they can be more of an instrumental thing. I maybe took this metaphor too far.
No,
Shit.
I love the musical metaphor in that situation, because how much I put those, much I apply those to my life.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of my life and just the scenarios that I put myself in and the experiences that I live with, I quote the teachers that I've had and the mentors that I have within the music business, because I've had a lot of people that I've learned from and people that have taught me things. And when you surround yourself with people who speak in those terms, you naturally start to, reiterate some of those things. And that's exactly what I've done. So I love some of the quotes that you threw in there and some of the I guess, puns and metaphors and
Yeah, like
similes and all that kind of jazz.
with anyone I'm speaking to, I try and speak in their language. Like, yes, we're both speaking English. We are both. Okay, I have some raw cacao in my mouth, so there's like some more kind of jumbled in the English that I'm trying to speak. English, England.
So I'm going to
yes.
stop you.
Uh-huh.
We're going to divert a little bit.
Let's divert.
Let's divert. Tell people, John, why do you eat raw cacao? What are some of the I guess negative parts of it? What are some of the positive benefits? What is it for the people that aren't familiar? Because there are people listening who don't know. So share with them what it is and why it is that you are digesting it.
So this is what a raw cacao package might sound like.
I'm sure that sounds great in a microphone.
I'm sure that sounds terrible. Like I'm sure that
probably does.
I'm sure that made the mic clip. So raw cacao just basically means there's no sugar in it. It means like it's unadulterated, like plant form, just being grinded and compressed. But like in terms of a daily practice, like if you're like unable to work with yourself and you need some guidance, work with something that has psilocybe. And I'm saying psilocybe because I'm in Canada, and really I've learned that like the age-old Canadian accent pronounces it as psilocybe, but for those who listen to a lot of American speakers, it's psilocybin. And so in conjunction, cacao really works well with the psilocybin, and it's an amazing antioxidant on its own. But like with psilocybin, it really helps to potentiate its capabilities. So a lot of times I will fast and only eat raw cacao, and I just really
What kind of fasting do you do? Do you fast for a certain amount of hours a day? Do you fast for entire days at a time with only consuming water? Do you consume tea on your fasts?
yeah, like this is an interesting question, because I'm sure if you looked up fasting,
There's many different ways to fast.
yeah, like I'm sure if you looked up fasting on Wikipedia, you would find many things that like that describes fasting as a certain way. But I guess when I describe fasting, I describe like and in a way, okay, I'm going to get a bit sidetracked. I was speaking with this one server today in Vancouver, and I was like, what is with this word fasting? Like, I don't understand the etymology of this word. I don't understand where this word comes from. What does fasting mean? Like, why is it called fast? Why does it not mean slow? Because oftentimes when you're fasting, it's not something that's very intense. It's something that's kind of dragging on, that seems a little bit slow.
I'm going to take a shot in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to suggest that when you slow down your digestive system, it fasts everything else. If it speeds up everything else.
I like
but
that.
I'm
Yeah.
expecting that you're going to give me a different answer and probably a more accurate answer,
No,
or to what your guess and your hypothesis is.
Yeah, like accurate is interesting, because that only means that it's like acute to you. Like when you say the word accurate, like are you talking about humanity, or are you speaking about yourself? So it at least with cacao, like when I fast, I like to eat nothing in the morning, afternoon, only eat like a bit of cacao here and there to like give my body something. But and like of course, like I do not do the Ramadan, which is intense, to not eat or drink anything for the whole day, especially in like very hot climates in yeah. But so to ask me such a broad question, like what fasting means to me is just like taking out an instrumental part of your daily life. So like just take out something that seems intense for you to leave behind. So like I usually eat eggs in the morning. I drink milk and cereal. So like take out all of that and like notice your body and how it reacts. Notice how your stomach kind of does like maybe a little rumbling, and then like it's like, well, what is this rumbling? Okay, well, like it makes me feel weird because I haven't eaten yet, but like, okay, weirdness is like maybe something I'm into, maybe something I'm not used to, but like, what is this? Okay, like after an hour, 2 hours, I feel like a bit more weird. Like, okay, because it's been so long since I've eaten eggs or so long since I've eaten anything. But like in general in life, just observe these things in a detached sense. So this is like nearly impossible for certain people to do this because we have so much weight behind us. And by weight behind us, I mean like the heaviness of the past. So, yes, inherently, this is something that we carry with us.
Well, I think it's super common now, and it's becoming even more apparent and just even more common, I guess, that with social media being so present, so prevalent in our lives, people are so quick to share the positive things of their life because to the outside world, they want their lives to seem so perfect and they want everybody to think like, I live this great life and this is my thing. And I definitely struggle with that as well. I'm not oblivious to the fact that I fall under that category, you know, like I had a conversation with someone recently and because I'm currently trying to rent out one of the rooms in my suite, and a girl came to look and she said to me, she was like, wow, like you have your life so together. And I looked at her and I was like, what? Like, I feel like I struggle on a daily basis, but to the outside world, it seems like I have my life so together. And with the online presence, that's definitely, I think, the picture that I might try to show is, you know, like this is this is the life I live. And with
So that's not always accurate.
not at all. No, I think people are quick to show the things that they like.
And why not? Because like that's the first things that we want to put up in the mix in life is the things that we like. And like the other things can rumble in behind in the mix, but like in general, like that distortion, that like whatever that is behind in the mix will kind of like disturb the continuity of what you're trying to project.
It's interesting how your brain can only hold so much information at one point.
But like we're constantly a moving stream that always has new water in it. Like what Heraclitus said, what the Buddha said, which they are two human beings that were contemporaneous, exactly like Lao Tzu. These people all spoke of the same thing. And it's all the same natural truth that they discovered in life that was lost to the common person. But now it's like we look back to these people and really find the truth that like still arises in every person, every culture. The same truth comes out. It's like not one person or culture is really gifted with the truth. It's just in all of us. But for some reason it decides to come and speak in certain people in certain cultures at certain times.
Well, I think that's where you have to constantly readjust. You know, people, I think we kind of touched on it earlier where, you know, we have these conditions that we're brought up with, and it's hard to throw those aside and cast them away, because as soon as you start talking about things that you believe in, or if somebody starts attacking those things, I like to think of it as our brains are like computers. We can only hold so much information, and once in a while you have to delete things and throw them in the trash bin and get rid of them because there's only so much memory in there and you can only remember so much.
Yeah.
And so once in a while you have to try and decondition those, but it's hard to do, right? Because we become attached to those things, right?
Fuck, man, like when you say that shit, I think of Anton Lemieux. Like, he did like a crazy comedy skit when like he explained this shit. Like, I gotta move this to the recycle bin, but then after like in his mind, like I just have to remove this thought pattern that's like not beneficial for me into the recycle bin. But oh wait, I have to empty the recycle bin. I have to delete the history of my mind. I said. And then I thought, like, I'm not really human anymore because we're running on these other metaphors that we've just been brought up with. But, like, I don't know, it was just powerful to hear you say that, and I had to cut you off from your stream of consciousness.
I appreciate you acknowledging it because, these are all things that these ideas that I am conditioned with. I don't know where I necessarily developed these ideas. It's just through different people and different teachers in my life, and I'm very grateful for all of them, and just the things that they've all taught me and the path that I've been led on through the surrounding environment that I've been blessed with in my life, and that's you included. So I appreciate you just even chiming in and getting your thoughts in there, because that's what this is all about. This conversation, it's about interaction, it's about close friends just diving into our thought process. And because I've said it so many times, like we've grown up with each other, we've influenced each other, and it's interesting because I feel like with us there's such a duality. Like I am like if you from an outside perspective, if you didn't know us and you saw us standing next to each other, if you just put us in a picture next to each other from an outside perspective, somebody who didn't know us, and you looked at us, would we look like friends hypothetically? Like if just from our appearance, like the way we dress, the way our hair is, would we look like friends? What is your thought?
Well, first we'll have to address the word that you've used, hypothetically. We'd have to analyze that word. And in understanding maybe like what you proposed is like culturally, do we come from the same cultural ecosystem? So, and people often think like, well, like you definitely don't look like you come from the same part of the forest, the same part of the ocean. Like if we were comparing certain animals, like, okay, I think you come from Australia. No, like
Your accent is weird, or you have too fair of a skin
yeah,
to come from this place specifically.
crazy as gorillas do not live in Australia. You ain't anything alike. But really, when you trace back, we're all part of the same like organism of life. Like,
Maybe that gorilla evolved, and maybe it swam over the ocean to get there.
Duality is just kind of the nature of reality in like every aspect of life. But I mean, I think we're all backs and fronts to each other, like as Alan Watts used to always expound how he continues to explain, like even though he is dead, even though he described in his many audio tapes, even though he now died of alcoholism, or he did die of alcoholism, that I only understand myself through understanding you. If I only understood myself, if I only like could get things through my own perspective, like it would be kind of narrow. Like I'm only one small slice of the world, and because we're so different, is the only reason why I can understand myself is because I look at how incredibly inspiring you've been in my life, because like we don't all the time think alike, but like if we all thought alike, like how boring and like simplistic would this world be? Because me and you are so different in many ways, is the only way that I can understand where I fit in this world, is because I have such an opposite mountain to look at. Yes, there's a valley in between us, but like if we were all on the same mountain, like that would be a very boring world to me as I try to imagine it. Because you are way the heck over there, I can see everything that separates us and understand the foliage, understand the biodiversity that separates us.
That's where I think that the greatest metaphor for yin and yang, we're two completely polar opposites, but within doing so, we complement each other so well. How good has this conversation been? How interesting has this been just to sit down and talk for X amount of time where we haven't talked much really for months and months and months because you've been off on this whole other exploratory journey, and I've just been so excited for you being on that journey, which is something that we haven't even really even touched on
addressed
yet.
here, and I would love to open up
No,
about
and
it.
that was kind of where I was trying to get to, I think, in the very beginning when I asked you about Vipassana, and then I was going to try and like push into that direction. But obviously, like, and this is what I mean is
good. It needs to flow in other directions, because like that initial like intention, that's you wanting it to go in a certain way that you predicted that you like wanted it to go in at the beginning. But look about like how what we have spoken about, that was like totally out of like what we predicted, that wouldn't have happened, I mean, any other way.
And that's the metaphor for life, is you can't try and resist those things. You can't be like, that's not what I want, so I'm gonna fight that with everything. Like, if you kind of accept it for what it is and try and like kind of work with it, you know, it's hard to swim upstream. Like, you know, that you're gonna get tired, and that's just the way it is. Like, you could try and be what's not Lance Armstrong? Lance Armstrong is the biker. Who's the other guy, the swimmer? He's another Armstrong. I can't remember his name anyways.
In general, even if your arms are strong, swimming up the stream
You're
is
gonna
kind
get
of
tired.
well, like, it's also against the law of nature. Like, yes, it will make you more powerful, more like intuitive about how to deal with life's problems, but like, where is this stream going? Like, is it going to your death? Yes, every person's stream is going towards their death. But
What happens after that, though?
but like heading towards this is like the point. I almost in a way see swimming upstream is like focusing on the past, because that's something that like everyone is controlled and locked into. But like, go with the stream and you can still orient.
You can still swim side to side.
Yeah, you
right.
can still orient.
If you want to get to the land on the left side or the west side of the stream, you can get there. But instead of swimming up the stream and trying to go, say, like north, like hypothetically northwest, go southwest, you're gonna get to the west side of the stream much faster. And then if you want, when you get to that point, you can take a break. And then if you want to get to the east side of the river, you can do that as well.
It's like, I want to be honest about flow. We've been talking about like taking a break, being like intuitive and like flowing. Like, what's more like intuitive and like more like natural than like our own humanly bodily cycle? So to be honest again about something else is like, yeah, like I needed to fucking pee really bad. So like that was kind of disrupting how I was like speaking. Like I was trying to signal to my friend like, yo, like, yeah, like I just said something I wanted to, but like whenever you're done talking, like I really gotta go pee, because like that was kind of like disrupting like what.
And it felt so good.
Yeah, like that release. We were talking about swimming upstream, so in like a way, like everything I was saying was like in the jittery like shaking back and forth, like, okay, like, come on, like, okay, what do you gotta say? I just gotta go pee. Okay,
Are
hold on,
you saying you were
hold on.
getting annoyed of me talking?
No, I was just like, like nature calls. So what nature is calling is like a one-way stream. And the one-way stream doesn't necessarily have to be urine. It can be like, right now I am organically wanting to speak about a certain thing. I am like organically wanting to freestyle on a mic.
It's that release or that relief of, you're swimming upstream, you're fighting it because you don't want, like in this situation, you don't want to be rude, you don't want to cut me off from saying what I was saying. But then that relief of when you got to walk out of the room and go to the bathroom and let it go. Imagine that feeling of like you're in a job and you're working this job that you fucking hate. You're swimming upstream just to stay
Yeah.
alive. And the second you quit that job and you don't have to work there anymore and you start swimming downstream and you're going with the flow, the relief, like just like even like in your muscles, like the tension, the stress that just gets released in that moment when you start going downstream and you're kind of like accepting the situation for what it is. Like how much is that just going to improve your life?
It's like a lot of times, like in certain techniques, like like vipassana, like they can be the raft, like the raft in the stream that helps you flow continuously with everything that is going in the same direction. And like yes, so people can flow without these techniques, and it can work for a certain time, but most people in our world are unconscious of like what they're doing. Like
Well, I
they know they're moving towards money and like a goal or even like a family, like, and yeah, like that's actually an amazing goal, an amazing mission, is to be like raising a family and like trying to raise the next generation. And that's like moving in somewhat of like an organic goal.
But do you think that's what everybody's meant to do? Because I think that's as a species, that's naturally what we're taught, is that our brains are meant to procreate or and like fight to do so, right? And I think that's kind of what our society has taught us is go to school, go to college, get a job,
Behave a certain way.
find a wife, have kids, buy a house, and die doing so. Right? But I think, you had touched on the idea of the raft in the river, and it's important to know that everybody discovers different tools along the way of their physical journey to survive that river, because that river can have a lot of rocks, it can have some pretty intense waves, and it can knock you off that raft pretty hard at times.
Yeah,
So you
like
need to develop the tools to help you survive it.
not everyone can survive without a raft, and it's even like
I don't think anybody can.
not saying that one raft, like, okay, like my raft, Christianity, like this raft is like the raft. Anyone who is in the Muslim raft, anyone who is in the Jewish raft, anyone who is in the Sikh raft, like that raft is poverty. And by that I'm describing is like this raft is the only raft I've ever been in. So any other raft, I'm sure, is like not very good. I'm sure that this raft will not work because I've only ever known one raft, and this raft has worked for me. So I'm basically like explaining that like this is something that applies to everyone, but we're so incredibly different that like how could this thing describe us all?
But to go down this metaphor even farther, it's amazing how well this metaphor is working right now. But just imagine the scenario of you're going down a river and you're on a raft and shit's getting really crazy and you're going down and there's rocks and you're scared of what's to come. And there's a person on another raft a few feet over, and the raft is maybe it's not bigger, maybe it's not better, but it's maybe shaped differently, or maybe it's constructed of a different material. and all of a sudden these people are reaching your hand out to you, and they're saying, listen, like, we can help you because maybe you feel alone on this raft, right? It's or whatever. And all of a sudden, but you have that instinct of, this is the only raft that I've ever known. This is the only raft I've ever been on. And I'm scared to jump. But these people are offering you help. They can essentially, not necessarily save you, but they're offering you a hand. And, to ignore that kind of help or ignore the acknowledgement that is there can be detrimental to your own health and to your own personal growth and to your own well-being.
In general, looking at the different kinds of rafts will help you understand the river, because every raft will handle the waves in a different way. Just like architects look at the different kinds of skyscrapers that kind of handle the space and the sky and like the environmental conditions of like the place where they're rooted in a different way. Like if we are so isolated that all we can understand is ourselves, yes, that's important to understand ourselves, but like if we don't kind of branch out and root in other areas and understand how other people can like express themselves, then like we're living in a very narrow aspect, in a very narrow life that really can't give us the full picture, which will hurt our lives in the long run. It will only make us be very, very biased on like what the true potentiality of the world can be.
John, I have a question for you. This is the Roots of Life podcast. This is going to be an episode that gets released while I am at a 10-day silent retreat. We've kind of planned things a certain way. Jimmy, I refer to him as James on the podcast, and I most of the time, I don't know if people recognize it when I call him James or Jimmy. I know a couple people have mentioned things in that way where I refer to him as multiple different names. But James recently did an interview or a podcast or a conversation. I think this is more of a conversation than an interview, really. I'm not drilling you with questions trying to get information out of you. But James had an interview, or sorry, again, a conversation. I actually haven't listened to it, so I don't know kind of what context it sits in. But he did a podcast with a man named Im. I think his full name is Imtiaz. Imtiaz. I could be saying that wrong, but this is a man who has multiple degrees through universities. I'm not sure if they're all in Canada or if they're across different educational facilities throughout the world. But he has, my understanding is he's been in correctional facilities internationally and has very interesting life experiences.
What a place to learn.
Yeah, I know, right? Like where you think that things might be coming to an end, and you come out of that, and you think you're just gonna be stronger at the end of that.
It's the beginning for many people. Like these people who are in the ends of their lives. Like, and when I say that, I mean like the ordinary life that all of us live in. This constructed life, they have thrown them into this prison, like this walled existence, and like this end has really brought about like something else, like an opportunity not to like continue their lives like in same four walls and to like die and fade and rot away. Like it's interesting to look at certain societies is what I'm trying to say, that like offer something more to people in prison. Like in Brazil, like they offer people ayahuasca. In prison.
In prison? Really?
Yes, and
Wow.
like these
That's so fascinating.
it's very intense subject to discuss, because like some of the victims, like some of the people's like the the daughter of this rape, or like the parent of that murder, they see these inmates in Brazil, they see these inmates working with ayahuasca, which is kind of something that a lot of people only do if they're moderately wealthy. Like moderately wealthy in our Western society is quite a big thing for like people in Brazil. Like it's not the same term I just used, moderately wealthy. To the point that they have enough disposable income that they can afford something like this. So these people in Brazil, like that have, like I've read stories about individuals in prison who have raped and killed people, and they get to work with ayahuasca, and the fathers and the parents of these individuals, they hear about, oh, there's this new test project, there's this new study project where these inmates, they were getting to work with plant medicine, hopefully trying to come out of what they've been dealing with. What they've been dealing with has like caused them to kill this person and that person. They have, and like it's such an intense thing. So these people that have been really affected by this by this intensity say like, this isn't right. Like, okay, like you fucking killed my daughter, and you are getting a chance to like work with ayahuasca to heal yourself. Like you should be in fucking prison for the rest of your life. You shouldn't have anything. You should be trapped and imprisoned. Like, period. Ayahuasca? Fuck no, I want to do ayahuasca. Like, why are you getting this opportunity to like to grow?
So I have a question for you. Would you compare that scenario, or I guess the way that some people look at ayahuasca down in the cultures down in South America, to how our cultures are currently looking at psychedelic studies, and studies are based around MDMA? How are the modern and urbanized people looking at ayahuasca? Like, do they understand it? Are they as informed about it as the natives and the because the way you're talking about it is these people are getting a new chance at life. And with your experiences, are those people becoming quote unquote cured of their, I guess, illnesses, their psyche that they've been battling with that caused them to kill these people, in the way that, say, like, people are being treated with PTSD by using MDMA and certain psychedelics in Western culture?
Like, really, we are just giving these people another chance, and but this chance is just simply that, like a chance. It's not something scientifically proven, like an algorithm. Like, if we insert this person with that chemical being dimethyltryptamine infused with like an MAOI inhibitor, or like MAO inhibitor, that they will encounter this reaction that will help them. Like, what I am trying to say is, something that works for someone, this plant medicine, will not work for all. But certain people see the criminals working with ayahuasca, and they think that they're getting treated. They treated, like I say the word treat, because it seems like something that's special. It seems like something that's delicious. It's like we're rewarding them with like something that's very expensive for like other people.
It is, though,
But
in a sense.
But like, really, to be compassionate, to be like the Buddha. Like, imagine if someone killed a child of the Buddha, not like he would have any children. And when I speak of this man, I'm speaking of Gautama in India. So he would completely have non-attachment, and he would understand that, like, yes, you killed someone who was close to me, but I want to heal you in whatever way possible. And if this is the modality that will help you heal, like, yes, it might be a treat. It might be something that's like expensive, but like I want you to heal in whatever way that's necessary.
So do you think that the urban population should be more compassionate towards the inmates of the correctional system? Because I mean, I understand they should be more compassionate, but
Like you can say that, but like imagine if you had a child, if you grew something, if you grew a person out of yourself and like a loved one, like your wife, your anyone, something that meant someone who meant a lot to you. And then this person was growing, it was living, you were teaching her or him everything that was important to you to like try to install, like try to download into this person so that that person could experience that, that person could live that, and then continue it out and teach other people. If you were trying to grow this person and then this person was taken away from you, this person was destroyed. And by the word destroyed, I mean like these sick people, these people who have really been polluted by our modern age, really like fucked up these people.
the culture that they grew up in, right? They've been taught things that to us don't seem right. They don't seem proper. They don't seem appropriate in any way, shape, or form. And they've been, just morally distraught.
But then these people attacking this only thing that you have held and cherished and loved in your life, like this new being that you brought into your life, as we've been describing. So in me trying to capture this, I'm trying to be as empathetic as I can. I'm trying to imagine these Brazilian parents who have had these children, who have had them violated and in a lot of cases killed, raped, whatever. Like the worst things that you can imagine have happened to these young children of the next generation. And then how they feel about these inmates like trying to get healed. Like, yes, I can look at it from the perspective I'm in, but I cannot even get close to imagining what they've been through.
I couldn't imagine giving birth to an offspring and then imagine that being taken away from you, which is an interesting concept in itself, imagining that just because you give life to something, you almost claim it as your own.
Attachment.
Yeah, I understand that,
Completely.
you love it, but it's an interesting idea within itself, just to, the idea that I've given life to you, so now you are mine. Right? Just like,
Yeah.
I understand that parents, like my mom gave life to me, and so I am hers in a right. But I am also my own person. She has given birth to conscience. She has given birth to me, and I am my own person. But within her mind and her world, I am hers. Right? So I don't have kids. I don't have anything besides, really physical things that I really claim to be mine. I have a girlfriend and I love her dearly and I appreciate her for everything she does for me. And I try my best to reciprocate that by displaying my affection for her, because she does it so well for me. But I don't claim her as my own.
Yeah.
Because she's not mine. Ultimately, she can do what she wants. She's her own person. She has her own conscience, and she can show affection and love to whoever she desires at that point in time in her life. And I think that's important to recognize.
Yeah. And even that same concept can be applied to ideas like this idea I had is mine, like this way of life is mine. And
Patents.
yeah, like that especially, but like in even just in our own heads without demonetizing anything, like we get so attached to like this is the way I think things are, and like these things become so dear and so we're sacred to ourselves, and we like kind of believe that like that's how the rest of the world should operate and how the rest of the world should think. And like withholding like a relationship that close, like you're really kind of setting yourself up for a failure because you're so invested in like a particular way in a particular person that like you're giving up everything, like every part of yourself, like which can possibly be very rewarding for this person because like you have this other love of yours, like investing everything in them. I guess it's very in the short term like fulfilling maybe because like they're obsessed about you, but like that person is like kind of consumed in a way that like isn't ultimately healthy for like their own well-being.
Well, I feel that sometimes people do things, I may do something right now because I feel like it's the best thing for you.
Mm.
But really, it's only for my own gratification, and so it's hard to differentiate the two, especially when you've convinced yourself that you're doing it for the other person. But I wanna ask you a question, John,
Hmm.
and it may be a hard one to answer, or maybe it won't be, but nonetheless, I want to ask you, what if you had one thing to tell the listeners out there, if you had one piece of advice that you could give somebody out there to improve their lives, or something that they could implement in their lives to try and somehow improve it, what would you tell the people listening to this podcast right now?
Now, that's such a crazy and broad question.
Just
Like,
one thing, anything, any
know.
one thing.
I know the question that you are proposing, and it's like people are so different and people are so broad. It's like just just with introducing a question like that, I can be like, "Yo, vipassana worked for me. Yo, this plant medicine worked for me," or like that plant medicine taught me this thing, blah 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 blah, and it's I can't like be the doctor that prescribes like a certain thing. So I guess in what I'm explaining, it already like in the absence of like explains like what I'm trying to get at. But like really I kind of deal better answering more specific questions about like reality.
Well, I think you already answered it. The
Mm.
first thing that you drove to was Vipassana, which I think is just a form of self growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to look inward and focus on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally taking that week or that 10 days, which they've kind of done through their own research, as the minimum that it kind of requires to really inflict self change.
Over thousands of people who have actually worked through this program, they've really had a good opportunity to deal with every personal archetype, like every person like kind of exhibits a different trait, and like after dealing with thousands of people, they get a pretty good map of like the human genome.
So, John,
Mm-hmm.
if I was to reiterate my question,
Mm-hmm.
what would you answer?
So I guess if I was looking at the whole human experience, and if I really was pressured into answering this question, now, like I would, I guess, begin with the generality of something that, oddly enough, Jesus Christ would say, know thyself. So something like this actually applies. Like this man, if he did actually exist, he was hitting on something that really every major religion was hitting on themselves. But because of the landscape that me and you have grown up in, this is something that is like more apparent than other things like, oh, well, Jesus is Lord, the only Lord. Like he was just one kind of manifestation of like the divine, something that we all have inside of us. So
He was one path up the mountain.
yeah, exactly. All of these religions are trying to climb the same mountain, but for some reason, some religions say that like my path is the only way. Like like why the hell are you trying to climb up that way? Why the hell are you trying to climb through those woods or over that river? That's impossible.
I like that river. That
Ye-
looks really pretty.
And even if you climb over that river, yes, you will get wet. Yes, it might almost cause you to die, but what are you going to learn in the process? And what I'm trying to say is, however you are able to learn about yourself, whether it be vipassana or through psychedelic or through just even writing a journal every morning, because writing a journal every morning will kind of cause you to be aware of all of your thought patterns, even if you're not looking over the journal. If you're writing it every morning, even if you're flowing, you're going to start to realize how you operate. So whether that be through like some crazy vipassana retreat, which is like quite an investment to do 10 days away from life and society, or whether it be like a hiking trip out into the woods where you can be silent and just observe nature. Like certain people heal in different ways. So just, and I know it's kind of corny to like to to quote Jesus like right away, but that was honestly like who that was the environment I was raised in. So like know thyself, however the fuck you know how to do that, like make that happen.
I don't think it's corny at all. I think to recognize your roots is very important. And I think I had talked about it earlier where I had said, you know, I had talked about the profound experience I had, which had led me to my spiritual journey. It was rooted in Christianity. It was rooted in a church, and you know I respect it for that, and I acknowledge it for that, and I love it for that, and I wouldn't change that for anything because it led me on the journey that I am on today, because I wouldn't be on the journey that I am without that moment and without that profound experience that I had when I walked out of that church and I looked at the world in a new from it throughout a new lens that was brighter than any other lens I had seen before. For myself, what I had experienced was that lens was something new, which it was a lens that for me wasn't led in Christianity. It was shown through Christianity, but I was taught that there's so much more to it. There's so many, as we said, there's different paths up the mountain. There's different ways that you can find your journey to the peak. There's different ways to the third eye. There's different ways to find the core, to find the energy, to find your journey to the higher frequency, to vibrate at that higher point. And on that note, John, I want to thank you for being here tonight on the Roots of Life podcast. I have waited for this moment for a long time. I love you as my own. You are a brother. You are family. You are my best friend. And I value and I cherish your friendship and the relationship and the bond that we share together. And I thank you for sharing your experiences with me. It's been a fantastic evening, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Roots of Life podcast. If you have any questions or inquiries, feel free to find us at rootsoflifepodcast@gmail.com. We thank you. We love you all. And we hope that you all find peace and enlightenment on your journey throughout this world. John, if you had any last words for the listeners out there, please share them with them now.
Love you too, man. Like, honestly, heading into this podcast, I was really anxious. Like, I've been going through, like, a lot of my life, like, the death of one of my best friends, and, like, just also leaving, like, a girl that, like, I was with every day for 6 months. Like, this kind of idea of putting your journal public. Like, I was explaining this to, like, some random person earlier today, and, like, it's kind of been, like, thought feedback loop pattern that I've been thinking about is, like, podcast thing, this, like, advent of, like, speaking, your mind flowing. Also, it's better if you don't have a script, obviously, because then you're really getting at the untouched. This thing that we are doing right now, presently, like, as I'm looking at like my old wallet, my phone that just broke because I tried to manifest reality because I was attached to it. It broke, which is, like, a very healthy thing to, like, let go of aspects of, like, mean a lot to you. All of this, like, it's so healthy to kind of get this stream of consciousness out there. Like, when you're writing a journal, at least in the common West that I had grown up with, you write in your journal, and then you lock it up. You put, like, a key on it. It's locked up. Only you get to read it. Like, you might tell your best friend, like, a tiny bit of your journal. But this podcast, like, is about expressing, like, everything that's, like, inside of you, just flowing, and, like, letting that out to whoever is listening. Only if, like, a few people are really listening to this that know us, or who don't know us. It's like, yo, read my journal, read our journal about, like, our lives and, like, what we are going through right now. And maybe that resonates with you, maybe it doesn't, but at any rate, like, you'll connect with the openness that we are expressing right now, and hopefully want to share that openness with other people, and maybe that will create some change
And
in
that's
your life.
ultimately what we try to do with the Roots of Life podcast, is present people with information and knowledge that will help them create change and create positive influences in their lives. And so, John, once again, I want to thank you so much for being here with me tonight. And I want you to know that you are welcome anytime on the Roots of Life podcast. You are a huge influence on this podcast and the content that gets created throughout this platform. You have grown up with both the hosts. Your DNA is a part of us. You are one with us, and your energy is always acknowledged and always appreciated, and your words are always shared here. So thank you, everybody, for listening to the Roots of Life podcast. My name is Taylor. I am one half of the host on the Roots of Life podcast. My guest today is John Sketchley. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I look forward to coming back from vipassana in the following weeks and sharing that experience with you and telling you about the changes that I've experienced and the knowledge that I have gained. And I hope to share that with you in a way that you can grow and that you can learn to love yourself, because that's what Roots of Life podcast is all about. Thank you, and we will talk to you soon.